Hello. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Is everyone excited to be here? Yeah, all right. If you are here for Can You Hear Me Now? Boost your impact in technical conversations, you're in the right place. And if you're not, you can leave. You won't hurt my feelings. I'll cry later, but you'll never know. My name is Valerie Harrison, and I am a cloud engineer here at Google Cloud. First off, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for being here, both at Next and in this session. I'm really excited to be in front of you today, and I hope we'll learn something from each other. So I did just introduce myself and what my title is, and I don't know how many of you know what a customer engineer is. Does anybody know what a customer engineer is with cloud? One or two hands over there. I like to joke that a customer engineer is the conscience of the sales team. We want to make sure things are right. Now, we are on the sales team. We're a technical resource. We make sure that no matter what you're consuming from us, what you're building, what solutions you're implementing, they're going to be technically valid, and they're going to have the outcomes that you desire. So that's great. I mean, that's my name. That's my title. But really, who am I? And why am I here in front of you right now? Well, I did not have a traditional technical background. I'll just say that right now. I was actually an archaeology and physical anthropology major in college. I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time. I learned a lot. But as you can probably realize, maybe I thought I was going to be the female Indiana Jones. But archaeology is not all about running away from a boulder and grabbing an artifact and taking it to a museum. There's a lot of schooling that goes on. There's a lot of money for that schooling, and there's not always a job at the end of it. Unfortunately, it's very strange to say, there's just not a lot of archaeologists out there. So I finished my undergrad degree, and I bounced around for a while. I was underemployed. I promise this is going to be a short story, and it will be relevant. I worked in libraries for a while, and in bookstores, and I really liked working in libraries, but I didn't feel that calling, that passion to go into library science. But what I did find a passion for was technology. And I found it in a kind of an odd way. I actually got onto online games, but I'm going to date myself here because I'm old enough that those online games were text-based. And I don't know if there's anyone out here who remembers multi-user dungeons, MUDs. Yay, Gen Xers, I see a few of you out there. And it was great, it was a lot of fun. But what really called to me wasn't the game. It was the interconnectedness of it. I could be playing with someone across the computer lab, across the country, or maybe across the world. And this technology was bringing us all together to do this thing. And so I became fascinated with how it worked, and I learned everything I could. I did end up going to some classes and get certified so that I could get a job. But I dug in, and I went through everything I could find online. And back then, there was no World Wide Web. Like, it was Gopher and Waze, and I was reading online books and things there. But I got my foot in the door. And I started at the very bottom, started at the help desk, through desk side support, networking, data center, VP of IT ops, before moving into the tech sector. And all of this is to say that imposter syndrome is real with me. It was very hard for me to speak up, in my early days especially, because I didn't feel like I had the chops to do it. I didn't feel like maybe people would take me seriously. And something else that was really common is no matter where I was, whether it was in the classroom or in a meeting room, I did not see a lot of people who looked like me and who represented me. And that made it even harder. Now, I want to turn it around, and I want to ask any of you, how many of you have been in a class or in a meeting room or even a cube farm and looked around and not seen people who represent you? There's a lot of you out there. There's a lot of you. How many of you are introverts? Yay, a lot of us. Introverts unite, alone, by ourselves in our rooms. That's also part of the problem. That's not everything. How many of you feel like you get interrupted when you're trying to make a point? Many of you. How many of you feel like you have a hard time getting a word in edgewise even to begin with? Yeah, a few of you. Sometimes it's very hard to speak. And I want to let you know that you're not alone. This is going to be a very tactical talk about strategies to help with these difficult situations and how to get your voice heard. Now, as you may know, DEI is kind of under attack right now. You've seen the headlines, you've read the stories, and I'm not going to go into all the studies that find that organizations who are more diverse actually do better financially and creatively and so on. If anyone is unfamiliar with them, please hit me up on LinkedIn. I would be happy to share those. But the Supreme Court notwithstanding, organizations know that DEI is critical for their ability to innovate and thrive. I feel very blessed to work for a company, Google, who not only takes DEI seriously, we have programs that we put in place. We also measure those programs and the impact. We report on them annually. And we do this intersectionally, which means we don't just report on how black people are doing at the company and white people, women and men. We say, how are black women doing at our company? How are Native American men doing? How are Asian women and men doing? And that's really important. A big part of DEI is attracting and retaining that talent. And the I in DEI is critical to feel included in the organization, that you have value, that you belong, and that you deserve to be heard. And that's why we're here today. Now, why does this matter? And what are some of the complicating factors to get there? The Journal of Management Studies found that a full 50% of all employees are afraid to speak up, whether it's fear of ridicule, fear of retribution, fear of asking a stupid question. I had an employer who told me, you're not allowed to ask stupid questions. I'm not sure why. Talk about terror. But for underrepresented persons, this story is even worse. In a 2010 study in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, pictures of black women were least likely to be recognized, and statements by black women in a group discussion were less likely to be correctly attributed to them than black men, white women, or white men. A 2021 intersectional study by McKinsey found that a full 30% of women felt like they were interrupted at work and that they had their judgment questioned in their area of expertise. And in another intersectional study by Carnegie Mellon, they found that 3/4 of female engineering professionals and almost half of engineering female students said that they'd experienced domineering teammates, and a lot of the women saying this is really common at work. Anecdotally, I have a colleague who has been a leader in technology for a long time, but he says he has a hard time being heard and being taken seriously because of the color of his skin. They don't see him as a leader. So yes, that's terrible, but who cares, right? Let's just do the work. Let's just keep our heads down, let's study, get good grades, do the work, and let the work shine for itself. And that's awesome, but there's a few reasons why that's not the end of the story. First off, you were hired for a reason. You were accepted to your academic program for a reason. Your ideas have merit and they have value, and you want to get them out there. You want to convince people. There's this great story in Medium I read about a female engineer who was in a group meeting, and she didn't speak up. Normally she didn't. But in her one-on-one with her boss afterward, he said, well, what are your thoughts? What did you think about this? And she said, well, here I made a bulleted list of all the things that I thought and how I think the project should go. And the boss was so excited, he literally jumped up out of his seat and said, we need to get the whole team back together and hear your ideas. And so he did, got them all back together. She presented her ideas, and it changed the course of the project for the better. Very important to be heard. Also, I hate self-promotion. I don't know if any of you hate self-promotion. It's just awful. I know, I see you, man. I hate it. It feels so ingenuine, but it's so important. It's so critical for getting those next opportunities, whether it's the ability to get the new role, to get a promotion, to lead a team or lead a project, that's really critical. And last, your ideas have value. You should be heard. You belong. You're here for a reason. Now, I'm sure some of you have heard the phrase, if you can't be a good example, be a horrible warning. I am here as your horrible warning. At the beginning of the pandemic, maybe we didn't all have the online etiquette that we do now. And it was a whole bunch of people in a Brady Bunch set of squares, and everyone's trying to come off mute and say things, and it was chaos. And the way that I found to speak was that I would start speaking louder and louder and faster until everybody else shut up. I'd bulldoze over everyone, and I was the last person standing. Did it work? I mean, kinda. I was the last person talking. Was it effective? Probably not. It was extremely rude, and I didn't make any friends. So I did a lot of research and saw what the experts said were really effective ways to get your word out there without being rude or domineering. We're going to talk about general strategies at first, and then we're going to go into specifics around in-person meetings and virtual meetings. And first off, I want to acknowledge that it's not easy. I agree, it's hard getting yourself out there, but it's really important. And I also agree that it's not fair. So many of us have worked so hard to get a foot in the door, to get a seat at the table, and then we have another flaming hoop we have to jump through to actually get heard and validated. But I promise it's going to be worth it, not only for you and the opportunities it will give you, but also for those in the future. Hopefully we'll pave the way so that others will not have to face the same things we did. I saw a great talk by Amanda Gorman, who is the youngest US inaugural poet. And she says, "If I choose not to speak out of fear, then there's no one that my silence is standing for." So first off, call it out. If you're being ignored, if you're being interrupted, call it out. There's two ways you can do that. Number one, you can do it with softeners. "I'm sorry, I hadn't finished my thoughts yet." Or, "I love that idea, but let me keep going." Or, I just think. So soften it or go forward. You can do it without softeners. And my husband has this amazing story. He has an employee, Anne, who there's a particular individual she's worked with that tended to interrupt her a lot in every single meeting. And she found the most effective way was to sit, put her hand out, and say, "I am speaking, I am speaking, I am speaking." And she had to do it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times before this person would stop and let her talk. But it worked. Even better, this individual doesn't interrupt her in meetings anymore. They realized that what they were doing, and now they have a much better working relationship. A few years ago, I went to some leadership training that changed my life. I was the kind of person that if you said something rude to me, if you ignored me, if you interrupted me, I would take it really personally. I would think, well, oh my gosh, what have I done? Or this person's terrible, what's wrong with them? And what I learned from this management training is, just because somebody does something that offends you or bothers you, it doesn't mean they did it on purpose. Maybe they don't know. Maybe give them the opportunity to know. And thus I found a phrase that I live with every day, and that is Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which can adequately be explained by, well, they say stupidity. I'm going to be really charitable and say ignorance. Maybe they don't know. A dear friend of mine works with a man who would interrupt her all the time. And it really bothered her. And one day, she finally had the opportunity to sit him down in person, in private, and tell him, "You know, during that budget meeting yesterday, you interrupted me while I was trying to finish my thoughts. I felt very disrespected, and I also feel like it demeaned me in the eyes of my coworkers." And you know what? He didn't know. He had no idea. He was so passionate. He was so just ready to jump in and help and do his thing that he didn't know he was being interrupting and he was being offensive. And it led to a great exchange where they got to give each other feedback on how to do better. Sometimes you can give people the gift of knowledge. Another thing you can do is prepare your thoughts in advance, especially if you're going into a meeting or a class where you know you're going to have an opinion, you're going to have questions, you're going to have things you want to say. You can write these things down or just compose your thoughts ahead of time. This does a couple of things. Make sure you're ready when the time for questions come. It also takes the emotion out of it. Sometimes we're very passionate, or sometimes it's scary to speak out. This helps take that emotion out of it. Be persistent. Use all the strategies. Use any of them. Sometimes one strategy will work better with one individual or in a certain situation. Keep at it. It's important. And you know that awkward silence that happens when it's the end of the meeting or it's the middle of the class and they say, does anyone have any questions or comments? And suddenly everyone has vapor lock. Like nobody wants to be the first one to speak. They're afraid, or maybe they're afraid of being rude. Well, jump right off of mute, stand right up and say something. You know what? You have a superpower. You wrote your thoughts down in advance. Next is what I'd like to call allyship and amplification. Allyship is finding an ally in a meeting that can help you get your words out, that can help call on you if they notice that you're not speaking. I use my boss for this, sitting right there. I say, hey, there's a lot of big personalities in the room. Can you make sure you look out for me and a few of the other members of the team who don't tend to speak out or have a hard time getting a word in edgewise, and have him call on us if we've been silent. You can also find a group of allies, or what I call a squad. I know a female manager, and when she goes into important meetings, she finds a couple people who she trusts to be in that meeting and amplify her ideas so that they get heard and they get properly attributed. So for example, I say something and someone says, hey, did you hear what Valerie just said? You know, Valerie's idea is great. Maybe we should follow up on that. That's your squad. And I want to challenge you to be an ally and to be a squad for other people as well. Make sure you foster psychological safety. Be a good leader of a meeting. Look around and see if there are people who haven't been speaking and call on them. Be the squad for other people. Amplify their ideas both in person and in private. Now I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to do the reverse Uno card. I would have used the reverse Uno card, but it's copyrighted. Are you part of the problem? As you see, even though I had a problem, I was a part of the problem too. I was the horrible warning. Some people speak to fill silence. They don't like that awkward silence. I've worked with so many sales reps, and forgive me if there are any sales reps here, but so many sales reps who ask a customer a question. They put a proposal in front of them, they say, Ms. Customer, here's your proposal, can I get you to sign it by the end of the week? Because it's going to have all these business benefits, and it's going to save you money, and it's going to do great things for your company. And they don't actually let the customer answer. Embrace the awkward, embrace the silence, and let people speak. Notice if you're the only one speaking. I know that takes some self-awareness. I'm always not the best at that. Google Meet has this really cool feature up in the upper left. It actually has a little percentage marker that tells you how long you've been speaking by percentage. Now, if this is a one-way flow of information, you're presenting an idea or a deck, obviously that's going to be skewed. But if you're in a 10-person collaborative meeting and you're speaking 75% of the time, maybe it's time to step back and cede the floor to someone else. Come up for air occasionally. Leave pauses where it's appropriate so people can jump in and tell their thoughts. Lastly, feedback is a gift. Ask people how you're doing. Are you fostering an inclusive environment? Did you do good in this meeting? Get some feedback and make sure that you're open to it. Next, let's talk about in-person meetings. I know we still have those sometimes, don't we? Has anyone heard of the Amy Cuddy TED Talk about power poses? There's a couple hands out there. I'm a huge fan of this. This has changed my life. And I know there's been some problems with reproducibility of her results, so maybe it's just psychological. But I use my power poses. It helps get the endorphins going, and it builds confidence. If you were in the bathroom earlier, you would have seen me do my power pose. You would have heard me do my barbaric yap, silently, of course, I'm in the bathroom. Now, you don't necessarily have to do a power pose in a meeting. I mean, you can, you do you. It's totally up to you. But you can stand. Sometimes my hips hurt, I like to stand in a meeting anyway. Stand up. It builds confidence, it gets you noticed. I know a lot of times conference rooms are Arctic, and my default posture is this, because I'm freezing. That's very small. Fill your space. Plant your feet. Stand up, sit up straight. Maybe put your arm on the back of the chair. Make sure that you own the space that you're in, and bring your whole self. Your seat can matter too. A lot of times you'll want to sit next to the head of the table, or next to the person in power, or near the person you're trying to influence, so that you can be noticed. I have a friend who gets to meetings early so she can get the best seat in the house. Make eye contact with everyone in the room. If you're the first one there, as people come in, nod and smile, how you doing? Even if you're the last one there, make sure you make eye contact. People will see how involved you are. They'll see how invested you are and know that you're there. And when you're speaking, make sure you maintain that eye contact. A lot of us tend to, I know I do that, maintain that eye contact. It's extremely powerful. Now, virtual meetings are a particular form of hell for me. I think I shared my experiences at the beginning of the pandemic. It is very, very hard in the cacophony of online to get your meeting, get your words out there, and to get people to pay attention to you. But there's a few things that we found that work. Number one, use technology to your advantage. Turn on your camera. I know nobody wants to see my post-workout bun, but if you have your camera on, people will see your motions as well as hear your words. I don't know if you remember Jurassic Park when they were talking about how the T-Rex was cued to see like fast motions, and if you move slowly, he would ignore you. Human beings are the same way. Squirrel. They see motion, they're going to pay attention to it. I have a friend who has a pet peeve. When your camera is here and your meeting window is here, and you're talking to the meeting window and everyone's looking at the side of your head. That happens a lot. What he does is he drags his meeting window up near the camera. So he's making more or less eye contact with people and getting that investment. Raise your hand. Every major meeting technology has a way to raise a hand. I know, I checked. A good leader will make sure that they call on you. Or if there's multiple people, you might go into a queue and they'll call on you in order. If they don't call on you, that's a great opportunity to give them feedback after the meeting to do better. Lastly, you can use the chat. It will get your idea out there. It'll get your thought recorded. A lot of times, if you're recording the meeting, the transcripts include the chat messages as well. And a lot of times, the meeting leader or someone else will see what you typed out and will say, hey, what did you just say? Would you like to elaborate? And it gives you an opportunity to actually speak. We talked a lot about really tactical things that you can do. And now let's talk about the benefits. Number one, it's going to build confidence. You're going to build that muscle memory of speaking and being invested and getting people to hear you and having your ideas out there and getting that credit. As human beings, it feels really good to be heard. It feels validating. We all want to be heard with our ideas and our thoughts. But most important thing is that you have value. You're there for a reason. And no matter what room you're in, you belong. Thank you.